The termination paper was already signed when the janitor stepped into the glass-walled boardroom, leaving a trail of rainwater across the polished white floor. Every executive turned toward him. Evelyn Cross, the regional director of Halston Tower, stood at the head of the long table beneath the cold blue lights. Her silver suit was flawless, her posture rigid, and her hand rested on the document that would end 23 years of service in less than 30 seconds. "Security is on the way," she said. "You should have waited outside." The janitor, Samuel Reed, looked down at his worn shoes. Water dripped from the shoulders of his faded brown coat. Beneath one arm, he carried an old leather-bound book, its corners softened by years of use. "I only came to return this," Samuel said quietly. A few managers exchanged amused glances. Evelyn stared at the book as though it were another stain on her floor. That morning, a group of investors had arrived unexpectedly. The marble lobby had been crowded, the elevators delayed, and one of the executive restrooms had remained closed because Samuel had found water leaking behind the wall. Instead of thanking him for reporting it, Evelyn accused him of embarrassing the company during its most important inspection of the year. Now she had gathered the department heads to make an example of him. "You abandoned your assigned area," she said. "You caused confusion in front of our guests, and you refused a direct order to reopen the restroom." "There was water near the electrical panel," Samuel replied. "That determination was not yours to make." Samuel's rough hands tightened around the old book. His fingers trembled slightly, but his voice did not. "I was trying to keep someone from getting hurt." Evelyn slid the termination paper across the table. "You are no longer employed here." The words landed in the room with the sharpness of breaking glass. Samuel looked at the document but did not reach for it. Behind him, younger employees had gathered outside the transparent walls. Some lowered their eyes. Others raised their phones, pretending they were checking messages while secretly recording. Among them stood Maya, a receptionist Samuel had once helped when her car broke down late at night. She pressed one hand over her mouth. Evelyn noticed the crowd. "Let this be clear to everyone," she said loudly. "Good intentions do not excuse disobedience." Samuel finally placed the old leather book on the table. For the first time, Evelyn saw a faded gold emblem stamped into its cover, the same emblem displayed in the lobby, on every company badge, and behind her own chair. She frowned. "Where did you get that?" Samuel did not answer immediately. He looked around the boardroom at the expensive watches, the untouched coffee, and the faces that had watched him mop their floors for years without ever asking his last name. Then he gently pushed the book toward Evelyn. "A man gave it to me a long time ago," he said. "He told me to return it when this company forgot what it was built for." The room went completely still. Evelyn opened the cover. On the first page was a handwritten message. Her face lost its color. Before she could speak, Samuel turned toward the door, where two security officers were waiting. As they escorted him through the silent hallway, his cleaning cart remained beside the boardroom. Hanging from its handle was a small brass key no one had noticed before. And inside the room, Evelyn stared at the signature beneath the message, the signature of the company's founder, a man who had supposedly died without leaving a final directive. Samuel Reed lived in a narrow basement apartment beneath an aging brick building on the south side of the city. The ceiling pipes groaned whenever someone upstairs took a shower. The kitchen light flickered in winter. His bed was a folding cot beside a small table crowded with unpaid bills, medicine bottles, and framed photographs turned pale by time. That evening, he entered without switching on the lights. He removed his soaked coat, hung it carefully over the back of a chair, and sat beside the window. Outside, rain blurred the city into streaks of silver and yellow. For 23 years, Samuel had cleaned Halston Tower before sunrise and after everyone else had gone home. He knew which elevator shuttered on the 12th floor, which conference room window leaked during storms, and which employees cried in the stairwell because they had nowhere else to hide. Yet almost no one knew anything about him. They did not know that Samuel had once studied electrical engineering at a community college. They did not know that he had dropped out when his wife, Clara, became ill. They did not know that every promotion he had been offered, he had refused because the night shift allowed him to care for her during the day. Clara had died 11 years earlier, leaving him with a promise he had never broken. "Don't let grief make you bitter," she had whispered from her hospital bed. Samuel had smiled through tears. "I'll try." "No," she had said. "Promise me." So he had promised. After her death, Halston Tower became the closest thing Samuel had to a family. He quietly repaired broken lamps, walked nervous interns to the train station, and left sandwiches in the security office for anyone working late. The old leather book had belonged to Clara. She had worked as a secretary for the company's founder, Jonathan Halston, before illness forced her to leave. The book contained handwritten notes, early building plans, letters, and private reflections from the years when the company was still operating from 2 rented rooms above a hardware store. On the night Clara died, she had placed the book in Samuel's hands. "Jonathan trusted me with this," she said. "He believed the company would change after he was gone." Samuel had looked at the faded emblem on the cover. "What am I supposed to do with it?" "Wait," Clara whispered. "You'll know when it's time." For years, Samuel kept the book wrapped in cloth inside an old wooden box. He never opened it again until 3 months before his firing, when a sealed envelope arrived without a return address. Inside was a single sentence written in the founder's familiar hand. "When dignity becomes a privilege, deliver the book." Samuel had believed the message was old, perhaps delayed or misplaced. But the paper carried a recent legal stamp, and attached to it was a small brass key. The same key that now hung from his abandoned cleaning cart. A knock echoed through the basement apartment. Samuel froze. No one visited him. He opened the door and found Maya standing in the hallway, holding an umbrella in one hand and a white envelope in the other. "This came after you left," she said breathlessly. Samuel looked at the seal. It belonged to the Halston Family Trust. Maya's eyes filled with fear and wonder. "Mr. Reed," she whispered, "I think they've been looking for you." By 8 the next morning, Samuel Reed was standing outside Halston Tower again. He wore the same brown coat, now dry but still creased from the rain. His old shoes had been polished as carefully as possible, and the white envelope from the Halston Family Trust rested inside his coat pocket. The building looked different from the sidewalk. For 23 years, Samuel had entered through the service door before dawn. Now the revolving glass entrance seemed to reject him before he even touched it. Maya hurried from the reception desk. "You came. You said the letter was important." "It is." She lowered her voice. "But Ms. Cross told security not to let you inside." Samuel glanced toward the lobby. 2 guards were already watching him. Behind them, employees moved through the marble space beneath cold morning light, whispering as they passed. The video of his firing had spread overnight. Some people had shared it with anger. Others had mocked the old janitor who carried a mysterious book into a boardroom. Online strangers called him a liar, a thief, and a man desperate for attention. Inside the executive elevator, Evelyn Cross watched the video on her phone for the 7th time. She had barely slept. The handwritten message in the book carried Jonathan Halston's signature, but she refused to believe it was genuine. If the document inside was real, then Samuel had possessed private company records for years. Worse, the brass key had been discovered missing from his cleaning cart before legal counsel could examine it. When Evelyn reached the lobby, her heel struck the marble like a warning. "You were instructed not to return," she said. Samuel faced her calmly. "I was asked to come." "By whom?" He removed the envelope but did not hand it over. "The Halston Family Trust." For one brief second, fear crossed Evelyn's face. Then it hardened into contempt. "That seal can be copied." Maya stepped forward. "I saw the courier deliver it." Evelyn turned sharply. "Go back to your desk." Maya hesitated, then obeyed. Employees slowed near the elevators, pretending not to listen. Evelyn moved closer to Samuel. "You stole confidential property," she said quietly. "You entered a restricted meeting, created a public spectacle, and now you return with a forged letter." Samuel's eyes remained steady. "I stole nothing." Then give me the key. I no longer have it. That answer changed the air between them. Evelyn immediately signaled security. Search him. One guard stepped forward, embarrassed. Samuel raised both hands without protest. They checked his coat pockets and found only the sealed envelope, a bus pass, a folded photograph of Clara, and a small screwdriver worn smooth with age. No brass key. Evelyn held up the screwdriver. So this is how you opened restricted panels? Samuel looked at her with something deeper than anger. That tool kept your building safe more times than you'll ever know. A few employees lowered their heads. Evelyn ordered the guards to escort him outside. Before they reached the doors, a black car stopped at the curb. An elderly woman stepped out, dressed in a dark wool coat. Beside her walked a lawyer carrying a metal case. The lobby fell silent. Evelyn recognized the woman immediately. Margaret Halston, the founder's only surviving sister, had not visited the company in nearly a decade. She looked past the executives and security guards until her eyes found Samuel. Then, to everyone's astonishment, she walked directly to him and took his rough hand in both of hers. You kept your promise, she said. Samuel's voice softened. I tried. Margaret turned toward Evelyn. Release him. Evelyn stood frozen. The lawyer placed the metal case on the reception desk and opened it. Inside lay the missing brass key. Beside it was a sealed document marked for immediate board action. Margaret's expression became cold. Call every director, she said. No one leaves this building until the truth is heard. The emergency board meeting began at 9:15. Samuel sat at the far end of the long table, still wearing his faded brown coat. Around him, 12 directors studied him with guarded expressions. Evelyn stood near the window, her arms folded tightly, while Margaret Halston placed the brass key beside the metal case. The company's legal counsel broke the silence. This key belongs to a private archive built into the original foundation of Halston Tower, he said. Only Jonathan Halston and 2 trustees were authorized to access it. Evelyn gave a small, bitter laugh. And we are expected to believe the janitor knew about it? Margaret looked at Samuel. He knew because my brother trusted his wife. A murmur moved around the room. The archive was hidden behind an old service wall in the basement, less than 30 feet from the electrical room Samuel had guarded the day before. No one on the current board had known it existed. The building's digital plan showed only a sealed storage cavity. They took the private elevator down. The basement smelled of dust, metal, and damp concrete. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Samuel led them past pipes and maintenance cabinets to a narrow corridor blocked by a gray steel door. The brass key fit perfectly. But when the lawyer turned it, nothing happened. The mechanism is dead, he said. Evelyn's lips tightened. So this proves nothing. Samuel crouched beside the frame. He ran his fingers along the rusted metal, then pressed his ear against the wall. Behind them, a faint crackling sound came from the electrical room. Samuel stood immediately. Everyone needs to step back. One director frowned. Why? The water leak reached the old conduit. Evelyn shook her head. The engineering team inspected that area yesterday. They inspected the visible panel, Samuel said. Not the line behind this wall. The lights flickered. Then the corridor went dark. Someone gasped. In the blackness, Samuel pulled the small screwdriver from his pocket. Guided by memory, he opened a maintenance plate near the floor and disconnected a corroded wire seconds before a sharp blue spark flashed inside the wall. The emergency lights came on. The room fell silent. Samuel's hand was trembling, but his voice remained calm. That is why I refused to reopen the restroom. The building engineer stared into the exposed panel. His face drained of color. If he hadn't cut that connection, he whispered, the current could have traveled through the wet service line. No one needed him to finish. The crowded restroom. The investors. The employees. Anyone touching the metal fixtures could have been hurt. Evelyn looked at Samuel as if seeing him for the first time. He had not embarrassed the company. He had protected it. Using the manual release hidden behind the maintenance plate, Samuel restored power to the archive lock. The steel door opened with a deep mechanical groan. Inside were shelves of documents, photographs, and sealed recordings preserved in fireproof cases. At the center stood an old wooden desk. On it lay a single envelope marked, "To be opened when leadership values reputation more than human life." Margaret carried it upstairs without speaking. Back in the boardroom, the lawyer opened the envelope and unfolded Jonathan Halston's final directive. The first page ordered an immediate review of any executive who punished an employee for reporting a safety danger. The second page transferred temporary voting control to the family trust. And the third named one specific consequence. Evelyn Cross was to be suspended from her position, effective immediately. Her face turned white. But the lawyer had not finished. "There is one more condition," he said, looking toward Samuel. "Mr. Reed must testify before the board before the final decision is made." Every eye turned to the man they had dismissed as invisible. Samuel looked at Evelyn, then at the termination papers still lying on the table. And instead of asking for revenge, he said something no one expected. "I don't want her destroyed. I want her to understand what she almost destroyed." Samuel's testimony began without anger. He stood beside the long conference table while the directors waited for accusations, demands, perhaps even humiliation. But Samuel only opened the old leather-bound book and placed Clara's faded photograph beside it. "This company saved my wife before I ever saved this building," he said. Evelyn looked up. Samuel turned several yellowed pages until he found a handwritten entry dated 24 years earlier. Back then, Clara had become seriously ill while Samuel was working temporary maintenance jobs. They had no insurance, little savings, and nowhere to turn. Samuel had planned to leave college and take 3 jobs, but even that would not have covered her treatment. Jonathan Halston heard about Clara's condition through another employee. He paid the hospital bill quietly. No announcement. No company photograph. No request for gratitude. "He visited her once," Samuel said. "He told us no employee should lose someone they love because they were too poor to ask for help." Margaret lowered her eyes, remembering her brother. After Clara recovered, Jonathan offered Samuel a permanent position in building maintenance. Samuel accepted, but when Clara's illness later returned, he chose the night janitorial shift so he could care for her during the day. Jonathan never treated that choice as a failure. "He told me a title doesn't measure a man," Samuel continued. "What he protects does." Evelyn glanced toward the founder's portrait hanging behind her former chair. Samuel explained that Clara had helped Jonathan record the company's earliest safety systems inside the old book. She knew the original wiring routes, the sealed archive, and the emergency release hidden behind the basement panel. Before she died, she taught Samuel how to recognize the warning signs Jonathan had documented. The faint burning smell. The trembling pipe. The moisture gathering where no water should have been. That was why Samuel had closed the restroom. That was why he had refused Evelyn's order. And that was why, even after being publicly fired, he had returned. "You could have let the fault become my disaster," Evelyn said quietly. Samuel looked at her. "It wouldn't have been your disaster. It would have been everyone's." The words struck harder than any accusation. Then Samuel revealed the final truth. 3 months earlier, Margaret had asked him to watch the company not as a spy, but as a witness. Complaints from cleaners, drivers, receptionists, and maintenance workers had been disappearing before reaching the board. Employees feared punishment for reporting unsafe conditions. The recent letter had not been delayed. It had been a test arranged by the family trust. Samuel was to deliver the book only if leadership publicly chose reputation over safety and dignity. Evelyn's decision had triggered Jonathan Halston's final directive. She slowly removed her executive badge and placed it on the table. "I thought authority meant never being questioned," she said. "I was wrong." Samuel closed the book. Authority means listening before someone has to beg. For the first time, Evelyn did not defend herself. She looked through the glass walls at the employees outside, the people she had passed every day without truly seeing. Then she turned back to Samuel. "Why are you asking them to spare me?" Samuel touched Clara's photograph with one weathered finger. "Because someone once helped us when it would have been easier to look away." The director sat in silence as the old promise returned to the room, not as ink on a page, but as mercy offered by the man who had every reason to withhold it. The board's final decision arrived just before sunset. Evelyn Cross was removed as regional director, effective immediately. But Samuel had asked them not to end her career with a single mistake, no matter how serious it had been. After hours of discussion, the board offered her a choice: leave the company with a settlement, or remain for 1 year in a non-executive role overseeing employee safety complaints under independent supervision. For the first time in her professional life, Evelyn chose the position without power. "I'll stay," she said. "Not because I deserve another chance, but because I need to learn what I refuse to see." Samuel nodded once. That's where change begins. The following Monday, Halston Tower felt different. The cold glass walls were the same. The marble floors still reflected the morning lights. But beside the executive elevators stood a new desk marked Employee Safety and Dignity Office. Evelyn sat behind it in a simple dark suit, without an assistant, private elevator, or corner office. The first person to approach her was a dishwasher from the cafeteria who had reported a broken steam valve 3 times. Evelyn listened without interrupting. Then she walked downstairs with him. Samuel watched from across the lobby, holding a new set of maintenance plans beneath his arm. The board had offered him money, a senior title, and an office on the top floor. He accepted only one thing: the position of Director of Building Safety and Employee Welfare, with the authority to stop operations whenever a worker believed someone might be in danger. He kept his old cleaning cart. Not because he needed it, but because he wanted it placed near the new office as a reminder that wisdom did not always arrive in an expensive suit. Maya was promoted to Employee Relations Coordinator. Her first project was creating a confidential system that allowed cleaners, drivers, receptionists, and temporary workers to report concerns directly to the board. Margaret Halston placed Jonathan's old leather book inside a glass case in the lobby. Beneath it was a small plaque containing one sentence from his notes. A company is not measured by how it treats the powerful, but by whether the powerless are safe enough to speak. Months passed. Evelyn changed slowly. She learned the names of the night shift cleaners. She ate lunch in the cafeteria instead of the executive dining room. She apologized privately to Samuel, then publicly to the entire staff. One rainy evening, she found him inspecting the repaired wall near the old restroom. "I can't undo what I did," she said. "No," Samuel replied. "But you can decide what it teaches you." She looked at the water running down the windows. "Do you forgive me?" Samuel was silent for a moment. Then he handed her the same worn screwdriver security had once taken from his pocket. "Help me check the next panel." Together, they walked toward the service corridor. The woman who had once believed leadership meant standing above others now followed the janitor she had humiliated, learning how to protect the people she had never noticed. Samuel never became famous. He never wanted revenge. He simply kept his promise to Clara and returned one small act of kindness to the world that had once shown kindness to him. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one holding the building together. And sometimes losing a position is the only way a person learns how to lead. If this story reminded you that every human being deserves dignity, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment about a person whose quiet kindness changed your life, and subscribe for more stories that prove one good choice can change everything.